Hello everybody, welcome back to the Desmo Works channel, and we are back on with the Panigale 1199R engine into 1199S bike. So if you remember, in the last video we got to the point where everything had been split apart, and I said from the last video to this one that I would start just preparing the engines to swap over. So what that has meant is the following. So since the last video, you'll see that I've swapped over the oil cooler, which is literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts, and it's just a flat face mate in there. Just be aware that if you're taking one of these off a bike that's been used, quite a bit of water comes out on oil, so have a drip tray ready. I also replaced the damaged neutral switch with the one that was on the existing engine, and I've just put the throttle bodies on, so no particular challenge there. It was just a case of putting the 8 bolts that hold the throttle bodies and the base plate onto the actual engine block, and then just reconnecting the smog pipes that come out of the engine. So a relatively straightforward piece of work. So one of the differences you'll notice on the 1199R engine is that we have some mounts already fitted into the rear of the engine where the swing arm goes. Now that's good for me because I also want to convert the swing arm setup over from a standard one to 1199R setup because it's adjustable. So what you see here is all the parts, but frustratingly, having just taken them out after purchasing them, I'm missing the bolt that goes through the left hand side adjuster and stroke swing arm holder. So it's going to be a little bit frustrating that I'm not going to be able to fully complete that swap over today, but I've got the correct hangers with the adjustment points on there. That's the left hand side, sorry, right hand side. This is the, no sorry, this is the right hand side, that was the left hand side. Got the adjusting assembly and its bearings to go on the right hand side of the swing arm. This is the one for the left hand side that runs inside the cage bearings, and then a few odds and sods bolts. So what I need to do as part of this changeover is I'm going to take the linkage off of my 1199S and the shock. That will be transferred into the 1199R's setup. I also need to take out on the right hand side of the swing arm, as you look at it from above, I need to take out this set of bearings and the carrier piece in there, and the spacer that comes out of the bottom. That all needs to come out so that this piece, the adjustable side, can go into the swing arm. And that is really the only difference between an 1199S swing arm and an R swing arm, is just this side here, where you've got the bearings with the different spacer and obviously the ability to be able to make the adjustment movement. Okay, so first things first, I'm just going to pop these bearings out, and then we'll be able to swap over to the 1199R setup. Okay, so if you're wondering why we had to push this bearing set out, this is the 1199S bearing setup as it would have sat on the bike on the swing arm. It would have gone to this side like this. Okay, there is a key difference in that these bearings are the same, but this centerpiece, as you'll see there, is straight through. Take this assembly off there. You'll notice on the R setup it's got a solid spacer piece that at each end has got a little key that goes on the spacers to the receiver on the back, and then on the main adjuster there as well. And that's the bit that, when it sits inside the swing arm, is the piece that enables you to adjust the angle of the swing arm in the bike. So that's why that piece has to go in place of the one that sat there. So hence why this set of bearings and spacer needed to be pushed out, and now I've just got to fit this one into the swing arm so that we are 1199R capable. Okay, let's do that piece next. That's the first bearing in. Just make sure that is seated right up against the face. There's a collar inside here for the bearings to sit against. Now I need to make sure that that spacer piece is in there. What I'm going to just do is put a little bit of grease inside here as well, just so that this has no chance of getting water ingress and seizing or anything like that. Okay, that's the bearing assembly all changed over, and that sits on the outside as your adjuster face. And you can see by the offset that if you change the position of where that sits, it changes the height of your swing arm in the chassis, or against the engine, obviously, because that's where it bolts, but obviously the engine makes part of the chassis, so that's what gives the range of adjustability in the R. What I'm just going to do now is take the shock out and the suspension link arm and transfer them over to the 1199R setup that we've got. Okay, if you remember when we took the frame off, we had these special lock washers that just fell apart when they came out because they're designed as a once-only use, because they're designed as a one-time lock washer. Here's the replacements. You can see sort of bonded together, not locked yet, as you can just see the gaps are there. So we've got 4 of these. That's the part number in case anybody else needs them. So you need 4 of these, 1 for each corner. So let's start putting this back together. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to lower down the chassis onto the engine and make sure that it sits properly over these 4 location bolts, which will then secure the bottom of the frame to the top of the engine and the airbox. Okay, there's a seal in here which is in good condition and hasn't needed to be replaced, so just make sure that nothing's in the way as you bring it down. You don't want anything trapped between this and that frame. Okay, let's just gently move that down. What we also just need to do is secure this crankcase breather from the top of the head on there, and that's got an Otica clip that goes in there, so let me just put that in. I'm not going to be able to film that due to the angle that it's out. Okay, that's the Otica clip re-secured. Little shout out to Rob Evans, who reminded me of what they're called after the last video. I usually call them a single ear or a double ear clip depending on how they're arranged, and you need a special set of pliers to put these on. So this creates the flat in the back of the once only use clips, and it just basically applies pressure on each side of the clip to bring it together. So there's a standard single ear clip that I did earlier. You just sort of see it keeps it flat and then deforms at the back to pull it tight. Okay, so that's now in, so I can now drop the chassis properly onto the engine. I'll just secure around here as well. Now just going to place the washers and the nuts onto the chassis. Okay, so that's all loosely touched down. Alright, what we've got to do now is torque that in. So let's just get the torque settings out of the manual. Okay, these chassis nuts need to be done up to 45 Newton meters. So I'm going to do it in a crisscross pattern. I'll do one up here, one down there, then the other one down the bottom, then the one back up the top, and then I'll just double check their tightness. Okay, let's do that. Okay, chassis is back on the engine, starting to get a bike back together. What I'm going to now do is reclip in the injectors, the top injectors, both in terms of getting it on for its fuel connection, and then I'll connect up the electrics as well. And I'll also stick on the seal for the airbox. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's the chassis all reconnected. The injectors are back in with their electrical connections plugged in, the fuel connection connected back onto the lower fuel rail, and that's it, ready to go. I've also put the airbox seal on. What I'm going to do is just put a cover over this with this so that nothing drops in while we're working on the rest of the bike. Okay, next step is to fit the vertical exhaust pipe on, and this is one of our next modifications because I'm putting a full Termi system on. So brand new gasket to go in. Okay, this is the system that I'm fitting, so it's a full Termignoni system, and that's the vertical pipe that's got to go on. So what I'm going to do is just grab the nuts and get that fitted in. The pipe is significantly larger on this aftermarket system, and I'll just have to make sure that there's clearance there, because at the moment with it sprung and not connected elsewhere, it's sort of sitting against the engine casing. But that's the vertical pipe fitted. You'll notice that it's got the lambda sensor there, and also just want to make sure you didn't trap the neutral lead, so I've just held those out of the way there for now. Okay, so we need to refit the front wiring mount. So if you remember when we took that off, it locates on these two mounting studs on the top of the horizontal head. Once I get that in, I'll also then stick in the horizontal spark plug cap. So quickly just secure them in. Okay, so that's the horizontal crosswire supports are attached, and the horizontal spark plug is now fitted in as well. Okay, next job is to fit the swing arm to the chassis. So what I'm going to do before I do that is just pack these bearings inside the left hand side of the swing arm as you're sat on the bike with fresh grease. I'm also just going to remove the front sprocket just so that it's easier to manhandle everything around. Just don't want that hitting anything as I'm trying to get this located in the correct place. So let's go ahead and do that quickly. Okay, so this is the swing arm loosely rested in place, so I don't have the bolt that goes in this side, which I've got to order. So I'm not going to torque it up because I'm going to leave this side. It's just touched in so it supports itself. And what I'm going to do is get the left hand support in so I can hold this in place as well, so that we don't lose too much time. Okay. Other parts that we've missed in the manual is that we should have reinstalled this, but this was already on this engine, so I've left it there. Likewise, the gear change was already in place, and the previous owner has also left me the slave cylinder for the clutch, although I'll probably take this off and use the one that I've got already set up. Okay, next job is to refit the chain guard. So if you remember, that goes on there, bolts down on the bottom, and is also held in place by the slave cylinder. So I'm just going to get that in place and then tighten that up. Okay, chain guard back in place. So the little plastic cover is 2 little bolts there, and then the main arm sits on the bottom there with that Allen key, and then when we fit back on the master cylinder, it will hold this whole assembly in place. Okay, next job is to fit the left hand suspension adjustment bracket and footrest hanger, the shock linkage, the push rod that goes to the swinging arm, and then the shock. So basically we've got to secure it around here. The tie rod goes into the top of the swing arm there, and then the shock is going to tie in the top there. Okay, let's go ahead with that. Okay, so that's the swing arm loosely suspended now. So this has not been torqued, this has not been torqued, the bolt going into the tie rod has not been torqued, this has not been torqued, and this has not been torqued. I'm going to now tighten everything down. So you know how I said I was missing the bolt here? Now because that I've got this, because this is now tight in against the engine mount, even though the bolt's missing at the moment, it's not an issue, because I'm going to just tighten down on here once the other side's on, so that we're nicely aligned and I can keep everything sort of together with that bolt missing. And then when that turns up, I can just stick it in the end here and tighten it all up, and everything's good. Okay, so what we got to do is tighten everything down to the correct torque setting with it sat in its loose configuration like this. Okay, so that's the swing arm fully bolted in place. So just to recap, 45 newton meters, 45 newton meters, 45 newton meters, 45 newton meters, then 25, 25, 25, 25. If this needs tightening, it's 60 newton meters, but I'll do a check tighten on that. And then I've just got to get the bolt that goes in here. So okay, so I'm going to call this video a wrap here, because I need to get the bike onto its paddock stand, and I'm just a little bit nervous that because I'm missing one of the bolts that goes into the rear swing arm assembly, I don't want to take it off of the stand until I know that the bike is definitely going to be able to be supported on its own. So that said, some decent progress made. So we've now got the chassis back on, or the frame or chassis, however you like to call it, back onto the engine. That's bolted all down. We've got the vertical link pipe for the exhaust in, and we've got the swing arm plus all the suspension in place with the footrest hanging brackets on. So some good solid progress made today, I think you'd agree. So once again, thank you for watching Desmo Works channel. The 1199R engine into an 1199S bike is progressing quite nicely. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below. If you like the video, give us a good thumbs up, and if you're not a subscriber to the channel, would really welcome you as a subscriber. So hit that subscribe button, and for further comments, obviously hit the notifications button as well. And I'd like to say a big thank you to all my first run of subscribers. We tipped past the 500 subscribers mark last week, which is a really nice feeling, so thank you very much for your continued support. Plenty more content to come. Once we get this back together and up and running, there's a few bits and pieces that I'm going to be doing to this bike as well, and then I've also got to do some fault finding on the 748 after we had the issue at last Cadwell. Okay, thank you once again for watching. See you at the next video. Cheers now, bye.